All right, so how the hell are you?
How the hell are you? Yeah. Pretty good.
Yeah. And so Puppetpalooza is what we're talking about today, right?
Yeah, because that was last week from when we were recording.
It was a lot of fun.
Yes.
And I just now, so that was literally a week ago, and I just now got all of the stuff into new bins and it all organized.
Yeah, because you got, as much as we used and went through, a bunch of stuff got donated.
Yeah, that donation was amazing. Some of that stuff was specifically doll stuff and like noses for bears and things like that.
Yes, yeah, dog noses, bear noses.
Mm-hmm.
I saw a lot of kids were into those.
Yeah, and there's so much. So I've got 3 bins of eyeballs now.
Yeah.
So I think with all of the different material we have now, next year, now that it's organized better and we've got an idea of what's there, we're going to come up, I think kids are going to come up with a lot more interesting ideas. So that's going to be fun to see.
So unusual to our just quick check-ins.
I just went straight in.
You went straight in. Part of the reason we chose this topic is because it's what is we just finished with. So I think it works out in this case. So
now, at last,
we come to the reason you are all here.
puppetry. Yay.
No.
puppets and puppetry.
Start with Katie Williams.
Yeah,
right?
Talk about Katie Williams, and we'll go on to the Slam and then Palooza.
Okay, so has it been like 4 years now?
4 or 5.
Maybe. So Katie Williams, she is a puppeteer. She does a lot of puppeteering for the Denver Theater. She produces a lot of shows herself. But the way we were introduced to her is I had seen an article about the Puppet Slam. And so I had taken Max to the first one.
The way you presented it to me was, this is something you'd enjoy. We should go do this.
Yeah.
And I said, yes. Yes, it does.
Yes, it does. Yeah, because, Max has always expressed a love for puppetry, but never really done anything about it. Yeah. He didn't have that circle of friends or anything like that.
How would you describe a Puppet Slam?
An adult comedy show. No, I don't know.
It's not even necessarily adult.
It has
its moments, but
usually family friendly, but more geared toward adults.
Right. It's at night and it's usually in a bar.
Yes. And they're, people are open to cussing and style of comedy or whatever. I believe it was the clown who did the baby birth. That was at a slam, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
It's really funny too. Yes. So yeah, I had found Katie Williams in a magazine article. We'd gone to a slam, and I just walked up to her after the show and started talking to her, and that was pretty much the beginning of that. We just started getting involved with more slams. Going to slams and supporting them. And
I want to say we had gone to 2 before we performed.
Yeah, which is kind of crazy when you think about it.
Yes. 2
slams and then boom.
Well, we're ambitious, and we have alluded to this particular project a number of times, but that's when we did Transylvanian Lullaby.
And mind you, this is over probably 6 months to a year.
Yes,
right?
Yes. Yeah. I'd say 9 months, 9 to 12 months is the process.
Had we done a Palooza?
No.
Are you sure?
Yes. I remember very distinctly.
I feel like we did a Palooza before we did Transylvanian Lullaby. But you're probably right. Max and I had fairly recently gone to go see Mel Brooks.
Yes, you took me to see Mel Brooks live one October, which was lovely. It was basically a showing of Blazing Saddles in which Mel was hosting and discussing before and after.
Yes,
It was a fun night.
It was a really fun night.
Between Mel Brooks and actually producing Transylvanian Lullaby, I think you were right, is that we did a Palooza between, but we had already started on it.
Because I have a hard time seeing me being comfortable asking Katie for us to perform without having done a Palooza first.
Yeah, it took us about a year because we started the October and then we presented the next October. That's the way I remember, at a Halloween, because that was the theme.
I don't think we planned for a year, did we?
Oh, because most of it was, when I say planning, most of it was talk.
Yeah.
We did and we did sketches, and we did talk, and we played around with the PowerPoint presentation a lot. So no, it was a lot of real, okay, what skills do we need to learn? And then I was helping you rearrange your apartment in Cap Hill, and you
started talking about the bookshelf.
That bookshelf, yes.
Yeah.
So what we did is we took a bookshelf that Catherine had. I don't know the history of it, but you'd had it for a while.
Mom and Auntie had bought it for Colin and well, Colin.
Yeah,
at the
and
time.
like any other wooden bookshelf, it was, it had all the different shelves and layers. And this was not exactly cubical, but it wasn't a tall, thin one. It was squat.
Yeah, it was very squat.
And we took the back off of it, and it ended up turning it into a shadow puppet frame.
Because there were essentially 5 different frames.
Right. And to kind of tie it back to Mel Brooks as to what that has to do with anything, he had told the story that night. I'd heard it before.
I had never heard it.
That his brothers had taken him to see Frankenstein, Boris Karloff, back in the 30s, when he doesn't believe he was old enough to have seen it. It affected him, and they saw it one summer, and he kept wanting to sleep with the window closed on the hot summer.
So let me paint a picture here, too, for this, because... So he grew up in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and so it's one of those really tall apartments with the fire escape on the outside, brick building, and, it's Brooklyn during the summer in a poorer neighborhood that nobody, and it was 1932 or something. So no air conditioning, it was hot outside. Anyway, go ahead.
His mother wasn't going to let him sleep with the window closed, it was too hot, and his complaint was, no, if I leave it open, Frankenstein's going to get me. So,
and if nobody knows this, Mel Brooks is Jewish.
Yeah, in case it hasn't come up before, he's Jewish. I'm not sure what that has to do with where we're going with this, but here we are.
Because in my mind, it was always that idea of that Jewish mother rationalizing this silly child thing. And in my mind, I always say it as a Jewish mother.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't make that association.
Oh,
but okay.
I totally do.
Anyhow, so he's, worried that Frankenstein's going to come get him. And his mother goes into this long, involved, here's why you don't have to worry about it. He would have to leave Transylvania. He'd have to, get from the countryside to the coast. He'd have to get on a boat and then find his way. And then this whole rigmarole as how it's impossible that Frankenstein's going to find his way all the way from Castle Frankenstein to their apartment building, go up the fire escape, and get little Melvin Kaminsky. And that story stuck with us, and that ended up becoming the basis.
Yeah, it stuck with me hard.
Yeah.
I love that story.
Yes.
I think it's so sweet.
It is.
It's so, I just love the idea of a mother going, "Oy vey, like, come on."
Right.
And rationalizing it to him and not trying to even comfort him, really, but just say, this is why that
she kind of was, because
that's her way of comforting
because
him.
at no point in the story is, no, Frankenstein isn't real.
Yeah.
She is buying into the fantasy.
Yeah.
And separating it, but not disabusing him of it.
Yeah.
It's a very strange line to have walked.
Yeah.
But what we had done is we turned the areas of the shelves, the frames, into different stages of that story and shadow puppetry, while we had marionettes of Mother and Melvin on top telling the story with the window and that whole thing. And that was a big project.
It was a big project. We didn't know much about puppetry, honestly.
No,
I mean, we knew the basics.
Yeah, we had the confidence not to really do a whole lot of research.
Yeah, I think we watched a couple of videos on YouTube.
Yeah, maybe. Lighting. Yeah, a little bit. And we just kind of went for it, though.
Yeah, and then I also was amongst 2 other projects during that time.
Right, and I was teaching myself how to sound edit so we could get the music for it. And then we played around PowerPoint. We're doing almost like a silent movie with the different flashes. Because one of the things that, by the way the shadow puppetry, for example, the way that we had this set up worked is we're not comfortable in front of the stage, even behind puppets, necessarily. Both of us aren't performers in that particular way.
Are we performers in some other way? I mean, you and your brother are performers.
My mother certainly thinks so.
Yeah.
But the point being is we liked being behind and in the dark.
Yeah.
That was very comfortable for us. And so it worked out. And that was, so like I said, it was on one hand, it was very suited to us, but oh my gosh, the fights we had making it work.
Yeah.
And part of it was just the general frustration building of when a piece of tech wasn't doing what we wanted it to do. The lights just weren't doing it, and we couldn't figure out why.
Yeah.
And the paper kept getting pierced for the screen for the shadow puppetry. And we kept building in pieces where we had to crank it and roll it. We couldn't just move. We weren't satisfied with the basic easy version of it. It had to have a contraption, and that's me.
Yes. Yeah. So we go into this knowing very little, having very little experience, and then not only do we try to play with the wheel, but we want to also recreate the wheel.
Yes. It wasn't enough that we added a wheel to a thing that didn't need a wheel. We had to reinvent what a wheel was in the process. Yeah. And that is really, I think, the first time, and there were inklings of it before, but that is the first time where our opposite approaches.
Full in.
Well, not only that, but our opposite approaches to going full in with neither of us being an expert in it yet started to show the cracks in our ability to work together.
Yeah.
Because again, it was very much, no, we plan it out versus we do it and then we figure out how to use it.
Mm-hmm.
And that caused a lot of problems.
Yeah. And we were playing with 2 different types of puppetry also.
Yeah. Plus sound, it was...
Mm-hmm. So then we finally get it done, but only the night before the show. So then we didn't have a whole lot of time to practice.
Right.
And you could very much see it the day out. I think Megan was a little frustrated with us too because we couldn't get the projector set up right.
There was a lot of polishing. We just lacked. Yeah. We don't like the performance part as much. We wanted to fiddle with our gadgets and our things that we made and then let it go.
Also, I also want to say that, so when we did perform it, I guess it was all led by all female performers that night. Was that
the theme, or was that just a thing?
No, that was just a thing that happened.
Yeah.
I think you were the only, well, no, that's not true, because I think there was a group. There was like 4 people and one of them was a dude too.
Yeah.
But anyway.
We were sprinkled throughout.
Yeah. But because that someone had noticed it, at the end of the performance, it was just really quiet. And I was petrified that people didn't realize it was over. They didn't know what was going on. And I was like, oh my God, this is terrible. This is like the worst thing ever. And then you were like, go out and bow or something. Yeah. Which, again, I don't want to do that. I didn't want to come out.
That's what you had to do.
Yeah, anyway, so I had to.
And I made you do it.
Yeah.
Because I'm the smarter one.
Anyway, I get very uncomfortable when I'm the spotlight of something.
But with all of that said, you're rolling into Milo's journey. I'll stand on the dock as you sail that ship away. And I'll wave to you. And I'll write you letters every day. But you go.
I have help this time.
Yeah, but you go there without me. For all the reasons we discussed and then some.
No, you're going to help.
See, yeah, sure, of course.
But again, okay, so we have realized that we can't work well together, and we tend to bulldoze a little bit or put too much into when it's someone else's project, right? Either yours or mine, right? This time going in, though, I can very much say, no, this is my project and this is how it's being run, especially because it's going to be a co-production of Katie Williams and I.
Right.
That I can then say, Max, I need you to do this specific job. And you can do just that specific job. And then it's not about you thinking, well, does she want more of my help? Or, where am I putting in my 2 cents and where am I not? Or whatever.
That is a true statement.
Yeah.
What is Milo's journey?
So Milo's journey is based on a children's book called Phantom Tollbooth.
Yes.
It's one of my very favorite books of all time. If you don't know it, you should go and read it. It takes about 10 minutes. That's not true. It takes longer than that. But
it's not a long book, and it's a very pleasant, easy read.
It's a chapter book, but it is an easy read. Yeah. It's about 4th grade, and it's about this little boy, Milo, who goes on this adventure and thinks everything is boring. He's never entertained by anything or what have you. The whole story is based on wordplay. There's a place called Dictionopolis and Digitopolis. The princesses are Rhyme and Reason, and the Weatherman, Whether.
Yes, a lot of puns, a lot of verbal puns, a lot of wordplay, like you said.
Yeah.
And that's very much the focus and the goal.
And there's a lot of characters, which I had to do step by step of making sure I knew what each of those characters were.
Right. Okay. Well, that's where the story comes from. But what is it that you're doing with it?
Well, yeah. So this is kind of where I'm getting into that. Okay. So I had to break it down and figure out what those characters' roles were to create an immersive puppet and live action journey for children.
And meant for schools and libraries.
Yeah. Okay. But immersive, so they will be essentially Milo. They'll be in the car and they'll go through all these different towns and whatnot. And there will be actors and puppets, lots of 3D objects, things to make it look like, a castle and whatever. But going through the book and deciding which characters were going to be puppets has been a journey in itself. It's a lot of work. It's very labor intensive. I don't have a grant or anything for this yet. Katie has agreed to partner with me in this,
which is helpful.
which is hugely helpful. She has all the experience
Right.
in producing something this large. But right now it is quite literally just at the phase of, what do we even need? What's the goal? How are we going to be able to do it?
Yes.
And how many people is it going to take? Putting a lot of faith on a lot of other people, especially depending on where the money's coming from.
Yes.
If I can get a library to essentially purchase it.
You also have to look into rights issues because it's a previously published work.
That too, yeah.
So yeah, specific jobs, yes, of course you get support and help. But yeah, I'm doing my best. You figure it out. You let it go.
And I definitely
Talk to me later.
Yeah, I definitely walked you through my first initial thoughts of it, and you were like, this doesn't work, or what about this, or And then I remember talking to me a lot about how I present it to someone to essentially purchase. So, i.e. a library or what have you. Right. And I think that made me take a step back and think a lot.
Even talking about it here, I very much had to prompt you to say what it was. Because I said, you have it so clear in your head, you just start talking about it, but you have to assume all the time that when you're quote unquote pitching it, you're talking to somebody who is 100% clueless about what it is you're talking about. Yeah. And that's not just the book. I mean, the whole, what are you presenting? Good exercise for you.
It is, yeah, very much so. So we've mentioned Palooza, but we haven't actually talked about what Palooza is and what.
Now's a good time to do that.
Yeah. So Palooza, this is the third year we've done it. Mm-hmm. Obviously, there were a couple of years during COVID that it didn't happen. Yeah. And it is a summer event that is usually outdoors. I think it's actually been outdoors all 3 times. And again, sponsored and produced by Katie Williams Design. And it is very geared toward children, unlike the slams, but it's more an event, an almost all-day event where there are performers, puppetry performers, there are workshops. Katie is teaching children how to perform and use a puppet. There are tents and vendors. There's a puppet museum. And then Max and I and Corey have always done the make your own puppet tables.
Right. Yeah. Make a friend.
Make a friend. And my way of getting you involved was saying, okay, Anomaly Con is over, and I know you miss aspects of it. Here's this other thing that we can do in the same vein.
Yeah, Anomaly Con was the ostensibly steampunk, but never fully committed science fiction convention that I did for years and years, wherein I had what eventually ended up being called the Modification Station. And then we had all the stuff that I'd collected for years before I met you, and then since, stuff from garage sales, estate sales. I had just mechanical parts, old electronics, just stuff that people could glue and they could paint and they could make it their own. But I had all this stuff, and I did miss aspects of that. On one hand, I was glad to not have that, but I did miss the outcome. So always, as much work as it was to get dozens and dozens of guns painted and prepped and ready to go, I did enjoy being there and watching what people did and having people come by and talk. And I did like that.
And it also, we loved it too. I loved it anyway, because it also it was the modification station where you brought stuff for them to do, but people ended up coming to you and saying, oh, this broke on my costume. Can I fix it here?
And that was nice.
And that was always really cool to see too, is what can I add to my costume or help fix it in addition to the guns and whatnot.
Yeah, and we moved that over, like I said, pretty simply to socks and paper bags.
Yeah.
And the same basic concept.
Yeah. We have bins of buttons and
Googly eyes replaced gears.
Yeah. And the first year we did it was at Stanley Marketplace.
Yes.
And it went very well.
Yeah.
Katie does an amazing job, has always done an amazing job at getting the information out there to people. She does public television, interviews on NPR, things like that. And it was a really good turnout.
I think I figured Katie out.
Oh.
There are 3 of her, and none of them sleep. That's the only
has to be.
That's the only thing that makes sense.
Katie is the most productive person I think I've ever
met. Her energy and time management skills are just, they don't make any sense. Like I said, three of her and none of them sleep is the only thing that logistically makes sense. Yeah. But the Paloozas are fun.
They're so much fun.
Right.
I love all the people.
Yeah, and this was our third Palooza, right?
Okay. One at Stanley.
Yeah, and then two at
the Green Box. In Green Mountain Falls.
Yes. And I've lost count of how many puppet slams we've been to at this point.
Been to? God, yeah, I don't know. Years of at least 2. Well, excluding during COVID.
Right.
Actually, have we been to one since COVID started?
Yes, because there was the one that was combined with Palooza the first time with the Green Box.
Right. That's right.
So do you think we're going to be doing another? Think we'll ever do another Puppet Slam? Honestly,
Doing another thing while we do a Puppet Slam?
do you think we'll do another Puppet Slam?
Oh, well, yeah, because
Okay.
we... You're really good at this, Mac. Well, because we have 2 things that we've been discussing as far as puppet shows, right?
Yes.
Projects that...
Let's start with Tom Waits. I'll get to the first thought of second topic here in a second. So there's a Tom Waits song, What's He Building in There? And all it really is a spoken word to really unorthodox musical instruments. And this sort of almost nonsense...
Which is the greatest explanation for
Tom Waits, yes. And it's this stream of consciousness almost conversation of a neighbor observing another house, wondering, what's he building in there? Mm-hmm. And he keeps saying weirder and weirder things. Mm-hmm. Went from like observations about the house. We cut down the swing from the pepper tree. Mm-hmm. He's got no children of his own, you see. To really weird stuff like, I heard he has an ex-wife in some place called Mare's Income, Tennessee. And you start to realize that it's the observer that's unhinged.
Yeah.
And it's really great. But what we want to do is we want to essentially build the house in the observer and try to find a way to present these ever-increasing oddities.
In shadow puppetry. So the house will be shadow puppetry.
Right.
The observer is going to be semi-three-dimensional.
Kind of a marionette.
Kind of a marionette.
A series of 2-dimensional layers to ultimately be 3-dimensional.
Yeah. And he's going to have a puppet of his own.
Yes, Mr. Stitches.
Which we love.
Yeah. We'll talk about Mr. Stitches when we actually talk about this project in the future.
Yeah. But Max and I love the idea of puppets playing with puppets.
Yes.
It's a common theme. I mean, even down to the cone puppets that I make, they're always holding another puppet of their
Catherine
own.
took some traffic cones and made them into little people who themselves have little tiny, smaller traffic cone puppets. Mm-hmm. And that was adorable.
It's pretty damn funny, I think.
Yes.
And I use them at the Palooza specifically.
Yeah, the other project, one that's been stuck in my brain for a long time, and I think it's appropriate for the subject matter of the unattainable dream, the thing that I'm always going to be chasing but never actually accomplish, is Don Quixote. Mm-hmm. Specifically the Picasso painting of him, which I want to do. The idea I have in my head is that sketch that he does, that very abstract sketch that Picasso does of Don Quixote. It looks like brush strokes still. And I like the idea that it just turned its head and started moving. Mm-hmm. And the puppet itself looks like brush strokes moving. And it's hard to describe, but it's not, because skeletal is not quite accurate.
It's not quite accurate, although the famous artist who does the horses with the branches is what you and I have most...
Right, yeah, so famous that we don't remember their name. But we went to the art...
I'm just bad about that.
I know. We were at the Denver Art Museum, and there was these sculptures, essentially, of horses, but they're not... I mean, they're branches assembled, cut to different lengths, but not reshaped. Just the lengths have been altered. The idea that branches are put together in their own natural shape to form an animal shape. Mm-hmm. And I always thought that was fascinating. So the idea, again, it's similar to brushstrokes.
Yeah. Don Quixote is something that we've been talking about for a very long time. It's one of those things where we don't want to start it unless we know what we're doing.
Because we're not clear on what we want to do. Is it a shadow puppet? Is it a marionette? Is it something completely different?
Well, and what we need to do is just start playing with different materials.
Yes.
Literally just a piece. Okay, let's make 6 of them in different ways.
Yeah.
Kind of like Monica making the fake penis for Joey.
I'll take your word for it. I don't remember that at all.
That's a funny episode. Anyway, so that's what we need to do with Don Quixote, and we've just got other things going on that always kind of gets pushed.
Yeah, plus again, it's unclear.
Yeah, but what we need to do is just play.
So what got you into puppetry? It's your impetus.
So, I mean, my mom definitely raised me on the Muppets.
Yeah.
We loved the movies. We loved Jim Henson. I mean, my mother had a huge picture of Jim Henson on her wall for, my whole life. Mm-hmm. And, he died of pneumonia in, 1983?
The late 80s or the early 90s?
I didn't want to say it was the late 80s.
Yeah, I was in 7th or 8th grade. Yeah. We discussed that before, but yeah.
And so he was just a big part of the household. My mom used to wake me up to Muppets albums, and I watched Sesame Street like crazy. And then probably the first puppet I ever saw, though, in live action, or in real life, was probably the Ren Fair. And that
up
was
close.
Bob. Yeah. And I used to search the Ren Fair when I would get there just for Dead Bob because he amused me so much.
Right. Well, what was Dead
And
Bob?
Dead Bob is it's a skeleton puppet. The guy who performs him or performs with him, it's supposed to be a ventriloquist act, but his face is covered because
Yeah.
he can't actually do the ventriloquy.
I want to say there's another name for that type of performance.
Maybe.
That's
I
not
don't
ventriloquism.
know. Yeah. But anyway, so what all drew me to Dead Bob was, I mean, one, he's raunchy, and was the best part of the Ren Fair in the 80s was just how uncouth it all was. But he also used to go around the Ren Fair singing, I'm getting buried in the morning, which is the song from My Fair Lady, I'm getting married in the morning.
Yeah.
And My Fair Lady growing up was my very favorite musical of all time. So that attached me pretty quickly. But at the same time of being raised on Sesame Street, I didn't realize that they were monsters until like into my 30s.
Oh yeah, the monster Muppets.
They were just my friends.
They were just fuzzy critters. Yeah. Although Grover would often self-identify as a monster for years.
I know, yeah, that's very true. And then, not that I'm a huge fan of Jeff Dunham's, however, Jeff Dunham, thank you. He did this skit where I think the puppet's name is Peanut. Jeff Dunham had Peanut have his own puppet who was Jeff Dunham, and Jeff Dunham was doing Peanut doing himself, and it was some of the most amazing ventriloquism that I've ever seen in my life. And again, I love puppets, playing with puppets, so there was that too. But then also MST3K, and that's probably the beginning of me making stuff out of junk. The idea that those puppets were just, okay, well, what do we got laying around here, you know?
Yeah, that was Hodgson's like stand-up routine.
Yeah.
Those, the puppets and the inventions were just stuff he had, and he would just goof on it.
Yeah, but that's my favorite part of MST3K. The actual, like, sitting in front of the movie and making fun of it.
As much as that is the most famous part, for a good reason.
Yeah.
What gets lost is that this is just an elaborate puppet show.
So what got you into puppetry?
Well, we had an episode about that already.
Yeah, that's true. But is there anything that you want to add to it?
Well, we discussed MST. That's kind of what got me back around years later.
Jim Henson died, yeah.
Yeah, is, okay, I see an alternative use here.
And I especially love puppetry because so many people have this idea that it's only for kids and that it's lame, right? Or that it's, it's only to amuse little kids or whatever. But that's so not true because we've seen some amazing puppet shows that were very much for adults.
Yes.
I mean, the burlesque one. And I'm not saying that it has to get dirty either.
Right, that's where, between Dead Bob and the burlesque reference, I'm wondering if that's your narrow band for adults. No, that's very mature.
MST3K too.
Yeah.
That's not raunchy. That's always been pretty...
Yes, it has been. In fact, yes, one of my favorite, shadow puppetry again. It's because that's what they're doing when they're in the theater.
Yeah.
Is whenever there's a setup where the obvious punchline is a dirty joke, watching Joel, who's who's dynamic with his robots, with his puppets, was their parent, their creator, is you'd see Crow open his mouth and Joel just clamp down on it and point a finger at it.
We're not going there.
Or how he'd hastily correct Tom or something, or redirect him. It's Joel, what are boobs? Oh, like Jethro Bodine. Oh, okay. It's so good.
So, yeah, and then...
I'm glad he's back.
Yeah. Quickly, we'll talk about kind of wrapping this up and talking about set design and miniatures.
Yeah, because this is more than anything else. This is your entry into this, is you like miniatures.
Yeah,
you like making small things.
I do. And so me getting into the guild especially was, I don't necessarily want to make puppets, but I can make sets for your guys' puppets.
Yes.
And that's not necessarily how that's worked out, although that's not to say that it won't either. I've talked to plenty of performers who do want the set aspect. But I've actually made several puppets since then, or started them anyway. And so it was something that I didn't think I would actually do myself. But that is where it started for me.
And that's your continuing appeal.
Yeah, was the miniature aspect of it. And I mean, that just comes back around to you and I not being performers. That's not what we went into puppetry or the guild for.
Right.
It's the creative outlet and the making stuff.
I mean, on my case, I'm probably best suited to a writer's room. Not actually going up and performing any comedy.
Yeah.
But, sitting around with a bunch of, other idiots.
Oh, talk about...
And throwing crap at each other.
Yeah, so especially... you just brought up the writer room. Bring up, so during the burlesque show, Cindy had brought up
We had
something,
gone to a puppet-themed burlesque show, and it was a blast.
and Cindy had made a joke.
Yeah, okay, so one of the performers did a bit to Mr. Science Theater, which made me giggle my butt off. It was funny.
Hadn't
But
thought about this before.
well, I can tell you, no, it's no. I'm glad that my brain didn't automatically make that connection. I mean, I got enough to talk to a therapist about. I don't need to throw that on the fire. But somebody else thought of it, so there I go. I'm fine. The MC Cindy, who's always great, she MCs like all the guild stuff basically.
She has at least for the last 3 years.
Right. She made the joke because she does the MCing through her puppet character, who's I wish I could remember the name of the puppet character.
Yeah, I can't think of her.
Her puppet made a comment about having had a sexual relationship with Tom Servo, and made a joke about all the robot attachments. Ha ha ha. And she said the one thing I couldn't stand was the constant running commentary. And and that made me laugh so hard. And I ended up talking to Cindy afterward about it. And, she and I were just kind of cracking jokes back and forth. Hit upon the idea of a bit where it's Tom Servo his first night with a human woman, and just his innocence, his complete misunderstanding of biological life forms, and just his complete confusion about everything is, of course, being right for comedy. But ultimately, it leads to Joel and Crow, just in shadow, sort of like the theater, sort of watching and commentating, and completely, of course, ruining the mood. Again, with completely oblivious to how things are supposed to go. I'm still tinkering with all that, but there's a lot there for me to mine.
Yeah, I feel like that's the first time that I ever saw you really just sit down and write, though. It wasn't an essay format.
Right.
All right. Where do you want to go from here?
I think we're good. I think we start wrapping up.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess as projects present themselves and work out, they can be topics for other episodes. But yeah, Palooza was fun, and I'm glad we did it.
Yeah, I'm always happy to do Palooza. It's never been monetarily valuable.
No, it's not. But it's a hobby.
But it's a hobby, and we enjoy doing it. We enjoy the people that we do it with. We'll talk later.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
Bye.
We got projects to do.